Have we got people coming in? Do I need to let people in or are we in?
No, people are in. They
Ah, brilliant.
are automatically entered from the waiting room. So yeah, we're good.
Thank you. Morning, morning, morning. People joining. We're expecting a good flurry. So I'll just give it a minute or two while we get people in. If you want to drop a little note in the chat to say who you are and where you've come from, that will be fab. Morning, Becky. Oh, lovely Shipley. Barnsley College. Morning, Daniel. Hi, John. We've got Gillian joining. Morning, Carol. Okay, right. We've given people a couple of minutes. They can join us. Good morning. My name's Sherry Lee Miles. I'm one of the co-founders of Go for Growth. We've also got Gillian Askew on with us this morning, who's one of the others. Say hello.
Hi, everyone.
Morning. And we do a range of sessions and webinars and different ways to sort of access our support and expertise. But this morning's is quite informal because, well, mainly because that tends to be my style. But also, it would be great if we could get some interaction. It is always with these things, not just hearing from somebody doing a presentation. It's hearing from one another why people are interested, what their particular challenges are. So we try and keep this session in particular quite interactive. So if you have got questions or you do want to chip in, please do put your hand up and we'll try and get some conversations as we move through. So we're going to be talking about responsible business, and I can move my slides on. We've got some of you introducing yourself in the chat. As I say, I'm Sherry Lee Miles, one of the co-founders. I'll introduce myself in a little bit more detail in a second. We're going to be talking about responsible business, what that means, what it includes, what you might need to think about in order to demonstrate that you are delivering it, how it will help you to win work in the public sector if you aren't already working in the public sector. We're going to be talking about sustainability, ethical business, responsible business, green business, and try and demystify some of the terms. You will definitely be able to ask questions, and the slides, the recording, and we've got all sorts of other support that's available after the session, which I will make sure that you get access to following our time together this morning. Okay, so it won't let me go backwards. That would be too easy, wouldn't it?
We love technology, don't we?
Oh, it's just the buttons are in the wrong place, aren't they? Okay. And you press anything, and it does something that you didn't intend it to do. Am I sharing again? No, not quite yet. Am I back on the slide?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, a little bit more about me. So I've been working in sustainability for over 20 years, probably over 25 years now. I try not to think about that too much. I've worked with businesses, with teams within organisations, senior leaders. I've worked with charities. I've worked with public sector organisations, big organisations, small organisations. And the conversations actually are always, in terms of sustainability and sustainable business and sustainable practice, tend to be in the same sort of areas. So regardless of whether I'm delivering a session as part of an MBA leadership module on sustainability, or chatting to individuals in a team trying to make sense of sustainability, it's sort of the same things. It's just about context. So one of the things that we'll be doing this morning, and one of the things that I always try and do, is help people to make sense of this in a way that makes sense to them. And I've been doing that for a very long time. I'm co-founding director also of Net Positive Futures, which is our sort of sister company at Go for Growth. And we have been working as a sustainability consultant for 15 years. But what I want to make sure that you are aware of is that none of this session this morning is about selling any services beyond this session. Everything that I'm going to share with you is free. All of our support and materials and resources are completely free. Our business model is such that we're paid for by our public sector organisations who are keen to support and engage and work with either existing suppliers or want to be suppliers. So I just want to be really transparent about about why we're here, what we can help you with, and the fact that that's not something that we're intending to upsell. So just to be clear on that, really. I basically, as a shortcut to who I am, tell people that I'm nosy and helpful. And I think that it gets to the root of the sustainability challenge, really. It is about being curious as to what's going on and then thinking about what am I in a position to do, regardless of who you are and what you're doing. So that's kind of that tends to be the focus of some of these discussions that I have. In terms of the actual what we're talking about, there are so many different words, phrases, terms, language sets that get bandied around to supposedly help people understand sustainability or responsible businesses or ethical business, but they can be really confusing. So the chances are that you will have heard of responsible business, sustainable business, corporate social responsibility, social value, green business, ethical business. Some of them drop out of fashion and then come back. So 20 odd years ago, we were talking about regenerative businesses, and then that went out of fashion, and now that seems to have come back again. So there are lots of different terms. And I used to get quite grumpy about helping people understand which the best one was, because I had views. But actually, I've come to realise that it matters less what you call sustainability and more what you understand by that term and how you communicate it within your own context. Where it becomes a bit more of a challenge is where you are just using a kind of fruit salad of terms, particularly within documentation, or when you are talking about things, or possibly within tender processes. If you just throw a few words in to make it sound as if you're kind of thinking about these things and you're trying to cover off all of them, which is that there's definitely a tendency to do, understandably, that's when it just becomes clear, that makes it even clearer that you're not quite sure what you're doing and what you mean. So for me, this is really to help you to think about what you mean by some of these terms and the confidence to use them in ways that make sense in a particular context. So when we're talking about sustainability, I will use all of these terms interchangeably, but I'll be very focused when I'm talking to a particular audience. So if I am talking to local authority clients, for example, where I know that they talk about social value, I'll use the language set associated with that social value terminology. Equally, when I'm talking to businesses where they are focused on corporate social responsibility, or I work a lot with universities and they focus on social responsibility, I'll use that, but with a level of clarity and consistency. So I don't know whether you want to drop into the chat any of these terms that are used within your own organisations, or have a little bit of a think about any questions that you might have about that. But I think it's definitely, although sometimes it can be tricky to start with, let's think about a definition. If you are working with a team or an organization or even with individuals, understanding what you mean really makes making sure everybody understands what you mean can be really helpful. So Becky's sharing that she uses social value, which is absolutely fine. I went to a social value conference for the first time quite a few years ago now, and came away wondering why everyone was talking about sustainability and calling it social value. And I think at the heart, that's because they cover the same kind of elements. And those elements are economic, social, and environmental, and they are considered to be like the three pillars of sustainability. I'm probably going to land on sustainability in terms of the word that I use, particularly for this presentation, but it does cover off everything. So the economic sustainability is fundamentally stable economic systems, but it's also thinking about how we can use economic processes and levers to unlock that sustainability work, the social value piece, the thinking about creating meaningful work or jobs with good quality jobs, with training opportunities, with companies that are invested in local marketplaces. So there's a huge amount of sustainability that relates to that economic pillar. The social pillar is the people element, the community cohesion, the ability of people to be engaging meaningfully with activities that will help to grow and build communities, that feeling as if people are part of a solution that is ethical and making a positive contribution locally, nationally, internationally. So the people element is kind of that middle pillar. And then I suspect that lots of people consider the environmental pillar to be the most important within sustainability or responsible business. But these are, it depends on the context as to which of these might have more of a focus within your own business practice. So for some teams, for some organizations, for some narratives, the environment and the environmental elements of sustainability are absolutely critical. And for others, they can be a much smaller part of this whole piece. So these are the kind of fundamental building blocks, and we use a building block image to kind of reinforce that. And associated with that language, then you can get a little bit closer to, well, what do we mean by this? We've basically got then the areas where there is an intersection between the social elements, the environmental elements, and the economic elements, that the overlap, the intersectional pieces are where we might say sustainability is happening, where there is consideration of all of those three key pillars. Now, it might be skewed more in one direction than the other, but the overlap, the middle of that Venn diagram, is where all of those things are given some consideration, and there's a response associated with the challenges. Because at the heart of this, and the conversation that I have to have less often these days, is making the case for sustainability. Most people understand that we need to be behaving differently to avoid some of the significant environmental challenges that we've got. We've got economic challenges at the moment, and social ones as well. So the heart of this is trying to tackle those some of those big global, local, national, community-focused sustainability concerns. So we used to have to make the case that sustainability was something to be considered. We definitely do a lot less of that. I'm just going to pause for a minute. I'm interested in how many of you feel like you have to make the case for being a responsible business or for considering sustainability. Is this something that you feel you've got to advocate for, or do you think people are there? Are you there? Do I need to convince you that we need to be thinking about sustainability? It's a different session if I do.
And whilst people are thinking about that and typing in their chat, Sherry, I might just buy everyone a little bit of typing time and answer it a little bit. I was at the SIPS Sustainability Summit, as you know, this week. And it was quite interesting. So there were 320 delegates in the room, and there was an observation that was a room of people who were there that didn't need convincing. But there was a conversation about, do we have to make the case in those businesses? So are they lone voices or part of a team who are already there? Or, you know, and there was a real mix and match, I think, around the room of those people who were part of teams who were thinking about sustainable business and what their values were and what was important from an outcomes perspective. And then there were those people who are saying, actually, this feels like an uphill battle. So I might be there, but my organisation's not. Or actually, I'm here because I need some convincing. So I think there's, you know, bits and pieces of different opinions. So we've got some coming in now from the chat.
Excellent. So no convincing necessary. That's from Carol. Clients demand it. 10% in tenders, staff and particularly younger employees demand ethical values. Yeah, it's really interesting. I think what has become clear to me in the last few years is that this is a recruitment and retention issue, not necessarily as much as anything else, but certainly it's a consideration for HR teams thinking about how they demonstrate to their prospective employees how their values are aligned with those of their future businesses. John, most of the businesses are aware of the need, not sure what they need to do or not realise what they're already doing. Yeah, I mean, the reason I think this is quite interesting and genuinely it has got so much easier over the years is because it is almost everywhere. There isn't a day goes by where you don't see some reason that you can hook that you can use as a reason why you should be doing something about, whether it's climate change or biodiversity collapse or flooding, or, you know, there are lots of things that you can attach this to. But you're right, it is built into lots of the work with tenders, and in that if you are wanting to work with a new client, you probably will need to demonstrate that you're doing something in this area. Main purpose is to provide social value. There's an awful lot of that as well. So we get it. Where there is that mismatch between the overarching ambition, and Jill, you mentioned this, and the organisation or people within the organisation not quite getting it, I might use a slightly different lens. And instead of talking about sustainability, and this is one of the things that I do to kind of sneak this in the back door, is just attach it to excellence. So if you've got teams that are focused or risk, so if you are in charge of your organisation's risk register and you're not making any reference to these big global challenges that very easily now are converted to local challenges, such as climate change. And I use this as an example that feels really big, but actually when I'm talking to groups, I was talking to a group of firefighters doing some work with fire and rescue in Greater Manchester, and they said, I know what climate change looks like because last summer I was putting out fires on the moors, or last winter I was working on the floods. So this has got really quite close to home. I think that so if it's not on your risk register, you've probably missed a trick. The other is around excellence. And if you are horizon scanning and looking at what excellent practice looks like, but you are not taking account of some of those big challenges, either as a risk that you need to avoid or mitigate, or as an opportunity, then again, you are probably not thinking about excellence in ways that are helpful to your organisation. So it doesn't have to be big flag waving sustainability stuff. It doesn't have to be using a language set, but actually people are engaging with this in really sensible ways these days. And I think although it's very wearying to still be talking about it in the ways that we have to, it doesn't feel like it's a difficult conversation to have. Something else that's made it easier, I don't know if you've seen these or if you use these, you probably have. They've had some quite good coverage. Their profile has been raised significantly since they first kind of were around. There were initially millennium goals in 2000. These are the Sustainable Development Goals. 32 countries, that's the United Nations, have agreed that sustainability is these 17 areas. And I use these in a couple of ways. And one of the things that I try to do with these sessions is share the things that are helpful for having a bit more confidence to talk about sustainability, social value, ethical business, responsible business in ways that make sense, because this is what the whole looks like. This has become, for me, a way of talking about what is included in that massive net of sustainability in a way that just makes sense. People get there really quickly when I use this. And I was using it with a group. I was using it with a group where I had a woman very, very clearly tell me that she wasn't remotely interested in environmental stuff. Sustainability wasn't going to be for her. And when we showed this slide, and she realised that gender equality, which is Sustainable Development Goal number 5, was almost entirely her work, she suddenly realised that sustainability, oh, okay, so what I do is part of sustainability. Well, yes, it is. And a sustainability person would have known that, but somebody working almost entirely within gender equality, and she worked a lot with female entrepreneurs and was in that business community, but absolutely did not believe that what she did was anything to do with sustainability until she saw this image. And I think that's really powerful. Equally, you know, people working in education, people working in healthcare wouldn't necessarily instantly believe that they were making a contribution towards sustainability, but they almost certainly are. And I think that's the piece John was saying, you know, lots of people will be doing social value activities or contributing to sustainability, or perhaps running really sustainable, responsible businesses, but aren't really aware of how to use that in a way that is helpful to them, either to win more work or to raise the profile of that within their with their customer base, or in lots of other ways that you might want to think about shouting around the stuff that you do in terms of sustainability. The other way that I have found these to be useful is tapping into individuals' kind of human values. Sometimes there's a challenge with sustainability in that it's seen as it needs to be somebody's job, or people don't understand what it means in terms of their own role. But actually, human beings do very often care about these things. And so this can be a conversation starter within teams to help them think about, well, things that are important to them, and then how they might align their kind of individual personal values with their professional activity. So it can be useful from that point of view as well. But it does definitely give you a way of seeing the whole and seeing all of those global challenges. Now, underneath each of these 17 goals, and 17 goals is already quite a lot, there are lots of targets and activities that are much more specific, but some of them are, you know, you can only really contribute if you are a nation state, or they're for governments or government organizations to kind of make progress on. But at this level, with this sort of visual, these I have found to be really helpful. And we've used them, just to give a little bit more detail, we've used them when we've been developing strategies. So we have worked with organizations and we've used this as a way of prioritizing, because we can't do everything, of prioritizing the sort of sustainability ambitions of an organization. So we wrote a sustainability strategy for a police force, and they as an organization, through a series of sort of stakeholder engagement activities, linked their own activities to the Sustainable Development Goals. So they had priorities around health and well-being, sustainable cities and communities, and they'd connected what they do to the goals and used that as a mechanism for outlining their intention in their strategy, but also mapping that to how they needed individuals and teams to be getting involved and contributing. So it's linked to the how do you tell a story of what sustainability means to my organisation. So that's a public sector organisation example, but it works with businesses as well. So depending on what type of business you are, there will be specific links to these goals that might be useful.
The next slide. Drop in something really quickly on the Sustainable Development Goals. If it's useful to anyone on the call, when Go for Growth did that mapping exercise of, it feels quite obvious to us that we would align with goal number 8, decent work and economic growth, but actually there's other things that we align to. And we developed a mapping tool just in Excel so that we could work out what would be the outcomes from the business of this. Why would that be important to our values? And what does that actually look and feel like and mean to us practically? What will we do to align with that goal? I'm happy to share it out with the slides if that would be useful for anyone.
Fab, thank you, Gillian.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes people do get a little bit into the, so Becky's saying yes. People do, and there is an exercise where you could look at each of these and try to work out how you could contribute. I think that is perhaps slightly less helpful than working out how you tell the story of your organization. So what is really material? So as sustainability business terms, we would be doing a materiality analysis. But what you've just described, Gillian, it is that materiality analysis, high level for a really small organization, already very purpose driven. So I think the beauty of this is it works at lots of levels. I shared this slide as well because I like to remind myself and the people I'm talking to that this still is linking to those three sustainability peers. It is still a focus on the planetary, the environmental, the societal through poverty and equality and well-being, and the economic through, as you say, workplace and consumption and production. Sometimes we get into chats about, what's your favourite SDG, or what's the one that you're most passionate about personally, what most links to your professional role. I've used this in so many different conversations, from individual coaching chats to teams to those strategy pieces. So I really do genuinely believe these to be helpful. Critiques, obviously, in that way that there is with everything, but in terms of thinking about your own priorities, it is definitely a really helpful tool. And it's worth you being aware of what your priorities are, because that will help you to tell your story more effectively. So if you are trying to communicate because you are writing a bid for a piece of work, or you are wanting to tell your story to your stakeholders, perhaps in a sustainability report or an annual report, or even just through your promotional materials, how do you communicate what you are doing if you're not just saying, well, sustainability is everything and we could be doing lots of things in all of these areas? Telling the story effectively is about, actually, no, we understand that for us, this is the language set. These are the words that we use because they're used by our clients, because they're understood by our customers, or something else. And we understand that our priorities are primarily environmental or primarily social, but we've got responsibility in other areas as well, and we make reference to that. So in terms of storytelling, which is something that I talk about a lot, and I don't mean we make stuff up, I mean we develop a compelling narrative about who we are and how we work as a business, as an organization, as a team, as an individual. Sometimes understanding your priorities also gives you permission to not wear yourself out trying to do everything, not be what I would call a busy idiot by trying to constantly, whack-a-mole of, well, we do this over here and we do that over there. Actually, your teams, your stakeholders will want to know that you understand where you can have the most impact and that you prioritize activity in that area. That makes sense. Don't, as I say, thoughts, questions, please do chip in. Another way of thinking about this, and again, sometimes this is just about seeing visually things that might be useful. So this is a slide that I use that relates to sort of donut economic theory, and as a reminder that we can break through the ecological ceiling, and that leads to significant challenges because we've only got one planet and those kind of conversations, and that we need to make sure that the social foundation where people have access to good quality food, access to water, that they're warm, that they're healthy, and thinking about the space where we have where we can all thrive, basically, is very often a balance between not damaging the world that we're living in and making sure that people are happy and looked after. So sometimes use this slide just as a way of starting to communicate the breadth again and the big picture activities. And it helps you to, I think all of this is part of an exercise that helps you to think about what makes sense in your context. And another really helpful consideration is understanding your drivers, understanding why you're thinking about this, what motivates your work in this area. Are you, and some people are just trying to tick some boxes, and if you are, at least, being honest about that and highlighting the boxes that you need to tick can be helpful. But sometimes working with people in your organization, if it's a small organization, it might just be you, but thinking about what will help. Are we trying to achieve something in terms of certification? And if we are, let's focus on what that requires. Are you just wanting to demonstrate excellence and what that means in terms of ensuring that your business is fit for the now, fit for the next, that your internal teams and your stakeholders understand that there are links between excellence and sustainability considerations? Are you wanting to use sustainability, elements of sustainability, as a competitive advantage? There are still, sadly, in some ways, there are still opportunities for you to be stealing a march on competitors in this space. Are you leading? Are you squeezing enough value from leading in this area? Or is it something else entirely? And it might be. And I think it might be worth me pausing for breath and it asking you to share what your own drivers might be or what you think your drivers might be. And Jill, you can do the filling again because that worked quite well last time.
I knew you were going to say that. I'd intuited that. Again, and I agree with Carol. So a number of conversations we have is it's the right thing to do, to do business in the right way, to think about the impact. And I've had so many conversations on it this week. We've been trying to put sustainable into sustainable procurement. I'm a procurement professional, as you know. So we've been trying to get people to think about sustainable procurement being the only show in town. And now actually we're trying to take the sustainable word out of that. So procurement just is sustainable procurement. And those are some of, my professional and personal drivers around. We have this position of influence and impact in that profession. How can we use that wisely? How can we use that well? What can we achieve? And what are those outcomes that we can have? And they're, very personal to me and my profession, but they'll be similar. And I think there's some more comments in the chat around it being rewarding. It is, when you can see the ripple effect of what you do, it can be really affirming actually, and very motivational and actually quite compelling from a competitive perspective. We in businesses generally, sustainable growth, and I mean that from we want to be here for the long term. We're here for the marathon, not the sprint. Being able to see the impact of that business that we're doing in lots of different ways can actually help us to grow. But it comes back to what you talk about, Sherry, in terms of that, how you tell that story. I find lots of small businesses, we hide our light under a bushel. We might not know how to talk about it. We might not, as you say, with your colleague who is supporting female entrepreneurs, didn't know that she was totally aligned to SDG number 5. We might not recognise that in our businesses. And therefore, we're probably not shouting about it in a way that's really compelling to customers that we haven't yet got.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things there. And you're right, it is the right thing to do and it is motivating, but, and it is a but, I would expect the people who thought that to come along to a session like this. The challenge is that we have not necessarily got to make the case for sustainability being important, but we do have to explain it in a way that bring other people on board. And what I mean by that is, I've had people on sessions like this before working in big companies that just say, well, actually, this is our main priority and focus is shareholder returns. And actually, our focus is not this. This is a bit of a distraction. So I think being able to link it to recruitment and retention, being able to link it to risk management, awareness of the importance of thinking about things from a slightly different perspective, considering it as competitive advantage are useful as well. So
Yeah.
it's not that it's wrong to say that this is really important and next generation and we should be thinking about it. But I think sometimes that, well, I do it because I care, will only get us so far.
Yeah.
And what I would say about trying to add sustainability into other kind of areas, and procurement is the best example for me because I've spent most of my career working with sustainability people doing sustainability stuff, but I think I've had most impact more recently working with non-sustainability people, working with procurement people and trying to embed it into some of those areas. So it's working out where you can have the biggest impact um, with different people, with different teams, with with a different part of the business. And
It's
there is,
interesting. No, sorry. I once followed Joe Fairley from Green and Blacks, one of the co-founders of Green and Blacks chocolate. So I had to talk about procurement regulations after she'd given away free chocolate and talked about chocolate. It was one of the hardest I'd ever done. But her opening line was, "Good business is good business." You don't have to pay to be sustainable. It doesn't have to sacrifice your commercialism. It doesn't have to mean that you're not going to make as much profit. It doesn't have to mean that your shareholder focus comes second. And Marks and Spencers were always a good example for me. They had plan A because there was no plan B. And so what they had was equitable focus on sustainability and being really good, profitable business at the same time. And so I think we are trying to hopefully move people away from thinking that you have to buy sustainability as a business and therefore there'll be a sacrifice as a consequence of it, because I don't think that's true. It can drive you forward and create more business and more profit and more talent rather than sacrificing it.
yeah, I agree. And I'm mindful of John's comment and this challenge of helping smaller organizations get it in a way that they can communicate it really effectively and use it to win that business. I think that the advantage that well, no, I think you can tell a good story regardless of your size. But I do think that sometimes if you've really got it, if you've really tuned into what it means for your organization, there are some benefits of communicating that as a smaller organization because there are fewer people that you have to convince, and then it can become part of your way of working much more quickly. But you do have to take a little bit of time exploring that context. What does it mean? What have you done to demonstrate it? What does it look like? How do you communicate it? What does success look like? But the starting point of, understanding the drivers and understanding the context is what should get you off the starting blocks, really. I use this slide to talk about the challenge of getting stuck on one thing. How you can think about it, how you can think about the different lenses of activities, and John's mentioning about embedding it into process, and this is the space that I find myself very often is working with the people that are trying to build it into an HR process, a procurement process, people's practice, because you can have a strategy or a document or a certification, but actually you still have to win some hearts and minds. So I think there has been an increased focus on carbon emissions, which is absolutely right, but there are also lots of other things, and some things just might be more significant for your organisation. So health and education as a lens might actually, for some organisations, be more important than pure carbon, because you might not be a particularly carbon intensive organisation. It might be that there are things that you could contribute to and would make a really sensible sustainability, responsible business narrative that are not carbon focused. So I use this slide mainly to help people to avoid that kind of single issue. We've got some thoughts and comments in the chat, which is great. Yeah, business benefits, diversity, the link between sustainability and ED&I think has been a little bit slow to be realised. There are loads of reasons. Sustainability impacts are felt most keenly by the most underrepresented groups usually. If you think about where the effects of climate change in particular are felt, they tend to be in the poorer countries. If you think about where, but on a much more closer to home scale, if you think about where the most polluted roads are, or if you think about where they put landfill waste incinerating sites, they tend to be in the disadvantaged areas. So there are some really good links to be made between equality, inclusion, and diversity and sustainability, and that might become a really big part of your business narrative. Equally, if we're going to be brilliant at problem solving for some of these things, and the breadth of them means that actually a diversity of voices being heard is absolutely mission critical, there are some brilliant ways that you can link up sustainability and ED&I agendas. So I would also urge you to think about that. So they don't have to be two separate boxes that you look at in terms of a tender response or in terms of communicating what you do and how you do it. I would absolutely urge that that sharing of those two parts of your work. So I think that we've gone from really big picture stuff, global challenges, the big picture environmental, social, and economic elements of sustainability, and tried to kind of drill down. I mean, very, very quickly. Obviously, it's a shortish session, but to give a sense of, well, what's important, what's going to be relevant, what will drive us, how can we communicate what we do, how we do it, why we do it, what success looks like. And I really like some proper practical stuff at the end of these kinds of sessions. It might be that a climate reduction plan is helpful, and if it is, we can help with that. It might be that improving your sustainability story, your social value contribution, how you demonstrate and evidence that you are doing things that make a difference in your communities can be included in a bid. We can help you with that. So that narrative, and we keep sharing our own story, because sometimes it's just, well, actually hearing how other people do this, hearing how other SMEs do this, hearing how other micro businesses, sole traders do this. Had a great chat with an ice cream van driver once, who was trying to bring that into their brand. We can help with that too. So I think from our point of view, it is just urging you to have a look at the support that we've got, and be in touch if you think that there's anything that we've talked about this morning that might enable you to use your sustainability considerations as a way of winning work.
Well, thanks, Sherry. And I would echo what she's just said. Go for Growth is here to help, and as Sherry said at the top of the session, because of our funding model, all of the support that we offer is free at point of use, and it will always be. So there's no barrier there in terms of any cost related issues. So please do feel free to get in touch with whatever questions you might have, and you might have different ones at different times, and you can get in touch with us as many times as you like. So we're here to help. I thought that was a really thought-provoking session, Sherry, actually. Really
I don't think we can do much more than provoke thought, if I'm honest. We can share the chats that we have, and we can try and provide some things that help you think about what this might mean in your context, because it is different with every single organisation.
Yeah.
So yeah, hopefully it has provoked a little bit of thinking.
It's certainly, I mean, we talk about this all the time, and it certainly made me, excuse me, think and reflect a little bit, and because I don't think we always get it right either, and things change. So yeah, that was really good. Thank you ever so much. I will get the slides out, the recording out, and that mapping tool today for everybody that was registered. So and I'm just going to cough, so I'm just going to go on mute for a moment while Sherry finishes.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for your time. Hope it was useful. As Jill said, be in touch if you think we can help with anything else.
Brilliant. Thanks everyone.
Thanks
Have
all.
a good rest of your Thursday. Thanks all.
Bye.
Bye. Bye.